something that mere man has made, but God himself has built it. And then secondly, it was to be built mostly from materials that were given as free will offerings from the people. God said to Moses in Exodus 25:2, "Speak to the children of Israel, that they may bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering." In the response to the Lord's request, the children of Israel gave so much that eventually the workmen came to Moses and said, "Hey, they're giving too much. We've got more than we need." In fact, Exodus 36, verses 5 through 7, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord commanded us to do. So Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, "Let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary." And the people were restrained from bringing, for the material they had was sufficient for all the work to be done. Indeed, too much. Now, I've been raised in church all my life, and I'm nearly 60 years old. And I've never yet seen a pastor stand up and say, "Hey, could you stop bringing? Could you stop giving? You're just giving too much. We don't know what to do with all this stuff that you're giving us." I have seen pastors count the money and go, "Hey, that's not enough," and pass the plate again. And I'm grateful for the vision that God has given Sam. It's not about the money. We believe where God guides, God provides. And we don't pass the plate. It doesn't make us any more holy than someone who does. It's just the way that we do things. But it really allows God to speak to people's hearts and to just give and to give willingly, and not just because somebody's shoving a plate under your nose. And so I really like that. It was just said, "Hey, whatever you feel free to give, just give it." And they brought so much that Moses finally had to say, "That's enough. Don't bring any more. We indeed have too much." And so the people had to be restrained from bringing any more materials. But where did they get the materials that they were donating? We're told that they plundered the Egyptians before they left their bondage. And they did so at God's direction. He told them to plunder them. It had to be the power of God that would cause the Egyptians, who would have considered themselves to be superior to the children of Israel, and it had to be God that would convince them to give them the quantities of gold and silver and other materials that they did. God knew what he was going to need, and he had the Egyptians provide that to these slaves who had basically nothing. So God gave to the children of Israel in that way so that they could give back to God. There's a lesson there for us. God gives to us so that we can give back to him. Giving is not something that we're to do grudgingly. It's a privilege to give to God. We need to realize that if it weren't for God, we wouldn't have anything to give anyway. So it's a privilege, not a responsibility. It's a part of worship, giving is. But we must give willingly. If we can't turn loose of our money or our goods with a cheerful heart, then we might as well just keep it. God's not impressed with that, because he loves a cheerful giver. The inference is that he isn't so pleased with the one who gives grudgingly. Now, some people look at it, tithing, for example, as, well, we have to give to God 10% of our money. And I like to look at it as that God allows us to keep 90% of his money, because it's actually all his anyway. So giving is something that's good for everybody. There in the wilderness, everyone gave such as they had. The same applies today. God doesn't expect me as much from me as he does from someone who has a lot of money. I jokingly said that when I became a pastor, I used to take my check down to the bank and I'd cash it into $1 bills, and I'd stand there by the teller and I'd count them out. 1, 2, 3, and the young lady, but the teller said to me, "Sir, money is really dirty, and you can, if you touch the money and then touch your mouth, you can get a bad disease." And I said, "Young lady, germs couldn't live on what a pastor makes, so." But God doesn't expect me to give the same as somebody who has a lot of money. He does expect them to give liberally, and he gives to us so that we can give. And some people get in trouble when they try to keep up with somebody that has more than them. God doesn't expect that from us. He just expects us to give what he lays on our heart. Just to be obedient. That's what it amounts to be obedient. He expects me to be a good steward of all that he has blessed me with. God gave. He gave his best. He gave his son. Jesus gave. He gave his all. He held nothing back, and neither should we. Well, let's take another break.